One of the concerns or anxieties people have around running sandbox campaigns is the vastness of it. You want to run this open world where the players can go where they wish, something like a video game like Breath of the Wild or Elden Ring. There's so much space and area that the players can go and explore. And that means you need to have that material ready for them to explore, which can feel like you have to have all this prep work front loaded before the game even starts. And if that's the case, you may wonder, well, why wouldn't I just tell a story arc based campaign? That way, my focus is narrowed to these different vignettes that the players will experience as they deal with the conflict of that story campaign. But there's actually a simple way to alleviate those anxieties if you actually want to run a sandbox campaign. Hi, welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall, and today we're talking about focusing your prep on what's going to happen next in your sandbox and asking some simple questions of your players. If you're running a sandbox game or any campaign, really, I think there is this key rule, a golden rule, if you will, that you can follow that will really help you out in preparing material for your game. And it's quite simple. All you need to do is ask your players what they plan to do next session. That one question is going to alleviate so much burden that you would have on you otherwise as a game master, because it narrows your focus incredibly. If they say they want to investigate the crypt of the Blue King, well, now you know that you need to key out that crypt and possibly any tangential materials that will be used in conjunction with it, like maybe adding a few details to a necromancer NPC that is also investigating the crypt the same time that the players. The key with this golden rule of asking your players is to set the expectation that they will need to answer that question at the end of each session that you play. Don't let them leave the table without giving you their plans for what they want to do next. And once they've given you their answer, they are beholden to do that exploration the next session. It's sort of like a social contract that they agree that they're going to investigate that because that's what you're going to prepare next for them. And I would have this discussion with your players early on and just be candid with them. Just say, look, this is an open sandbox world. You can go and explore what you want and do what you want, but I need to know ahead of time what you want to do so I can prepare that material and have it ready for you guys. You are one person, one game master all. You are the one that has to do all this work to get your game world ready, but you don't want to spend a lot of time preparing elements that your players aren't going to explore soon or maybe explore at all. If you're having fun spending your time on this video, then please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more content and discussions like this in the future. Now, following the golden rule should take you pretty far in your game prep, assuming your players are doing their best to honor this social contract and they're using their abilities to follow through on what they said they would explore next within your campaign world. But I know what you're thinking, and it's true. Inevitably, at some point, some of your game sessions are going to head off on a tangent or an unexpected branch. This happens for a lot of reasons. It could be that your players' expectations were wrong, or maybe the material was too difficult. They didn't anticipate 50 orcs camped out in front of the dungeon entrance, or maybe they get hit with a random encounter that changes the situation completely. By the way, I think it's totally fine to telegraph to your players as they describe their next plans if they're going somewhere dangerous. Like if it's going to be something that's above their heads, I would just tell them that so they can either change their plans or be ready for things that are going to be challenging for them. That way you don't run into the situation as often, but yes, it's still going to happen. Whatever the case is, this can be a little bit more stressful for some game masters. You're entering into that improv territory, and some game masters are more comfortable than others when doing improv on the fly. So when the derailment happens, there are a few different things that you could do. First, you can always be honest with your players and just tell them that they are doing something that you hadn't expected or anticipated. If it's severe enough, like entering into a totally different dungeon, maybe you'll tell them that you're going to have to call the session there. As a game master, you always have the right to end a session early, even if that is a bit disappointing for you and or your players. Now, I would call this the most extreme option and probably should be used as a last resort, but it is an option, so I just want you to be aware of it, and I'm starting with it here first. Your second option is to improv it. Make stuff up as you go along. There are lots of different resources that can help you here, random tables that generate contents for dungeons or NPCs, things like that as you need. This is fine. As a game master, you are going to have to improv sometimes. So depending on how comfortable you feel with it, you can just go with it. You can try to learn and get better in your improv, or, you can rely a little bit more on some of those tools to help you out as you're running it on the fly. In my opinion, this option is the most mentally taxing of your options. You're not only engaging all of your faculties that it takes to run a game, which is several different talents, but you also have to engage your brain in that creativity mode where you're generating content as you go. My best advice here is to not second guess yourself too much. Go with your first instincts on the ideas that you have and just kind of elaborate or build on them from there. Use those random tables, but try to be sparing as possible. They do tend to slow down the flow of your game, and depending on your group's rhythm and pacing, it can make the session feel off if it's happening too often. Your third option is to have some supplementary prep work ready to go. Usually this is a small adventuring location or a set of locations that you can choose from. Most likely a small ruin or a small monster lair that your players could explore. You don't need much. You could use something like the 5-room dungeon or something like that. You're just looking for something that's going to fill some time during your game session and give the players that bit of adventure and excitement until you can figure out what their new next steps are going to be for your next session as you start to prepare for that. There is a balance here in kind of building these types of locations. These locations are probably going to have to be a bit generic, so you could slot them into different locations on your map and have them make sense. But you also probably want to have some distinct flavor to them that give them kind of their own unique edge or narrative to them, and that will help the players kind of have fun with it, engage with it a bit more, and maybe be a little bit more memorable for them, even though it's just kind of improv material for you. There are definitely a lot of products out there that provide these kind of like one-page dungeons or one-shot adventures. You can use those if you want, or you can make up your own and just kind of have them in your back pocket ready to go. Whatever makes sense for you and how many you think you might need, that's something you can work on and build out in your prep work as you're doing that in your off time. Speaking of prep work, let's talk a little bit about how you should prioritize your prep work in this style of game flow. First, you want to work on the material for the party's next stated plan. Whatever that is, locations, NPCs, treasures, etc. Just make sure you have enough material to run sort of your average session length, whatever that is. If it's 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, make sure you have enough material to run that next session, focusing on whatever their stated plan was that they told you about. Then, if you don't have any of that supplementary material we talked about, make or find some that you can use to slot in as filler in case their plan A goes awry. After that, I would start working on material that supports the nearby areas of the players. For example, if you're running a hex crawl and your players are specifically exploring a single hex in your next game session, well, maybe start working on some of the details of the neighboring hexes nearby. There's always a chance they'll transition to something nearby once they're done with what they're currently doing. Or perhaps you could work on a denizen of a nearby area that would maybe come to the area that they're currently in, and maybe they have some interactions with it. Maybe they follow it back from where it came from, or they find out information from it about the nearby areas, and that gives them ideas for their next plans. Just work on things that are sort of near them, because those are probably your highest probability of being used next. Once you're outside of that next session material, You are making some guesswork here, so just be aware of that. Then if you still have more free time, you can work on whatever excites you the most. Try to make sure it'll have some payoff in your game in the nearby future. Again, that can be pretty difficult to predict, but you probably have some sense of what your players are interested in doing or things that they might check out next. But I understand sometimes game masters also like to world build for the sake of world building. And that's okay as long as you have your bases covered on what you need to run your next game session. You can really work on whatever you want, but those are just my kind of suggestions or tips on how you would sort of maximize your prep time, because some people have limited time on what they can spend for preparing their D&D games. Real life and other priorities also take some precedence. So be aware of your time that you have available and maximize that to your best advantage for running your games. So that's really it. Ask your players what they'd like to do in the next game session, then make material for that session. It's a pretty simple rule. Kind of a golden rule though, easy to follow. This sort of just-in-time prep style is great because it keeps you from making material that won't ever be seen in the campaign, and it keeps you focused on what you need to do to make sure you're ready for your next session. Make sure you have some sort of backup plan in case things go awry, but as long as you're being open and honest with your players, they should be understanding and trying to adhere to that kind of social contract that they've agreed to, and that sort of helps you out in terms of the workload that you need to do for your game. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more content and discussions like this in the future. It really does help the channel out a lot. Consider checking out Enchanted Nimbus, my monthly newsletter. Thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you in the next one.